The rain hadn't stopped since the funeral. It fell in slow, uneven drops against the window, tracing crooked lines down the glass. Daniel Reed sat alone at the edge of the couch, still wearing the same black suit from 3 days ago. Lydia's perfume lingered faintly in the air. Lavender and something softer, something that always reminded him of safety. But there was no safety anymore, only silence. Her funeral had been small, a closed casket, because the car accident had left too much damage. He'd stood beside that polished box and whispered his final goodbye, his voice cracking on every word. He remembered touching the coffin, feeling how cold and lifeless it was, and how it made the idea of forever sink deep into his bones. Now the house felt like a museum of her absence. Every photograph, every sweater draped over the chair felt like it was watching him. The clock struck 11:47 p.m. Daniel's phone buzzed on the coffee table. At first he ignored it. People still sent condolences. But something about the vibration, short, twice, caught his attention. He picked up the phone, and the screen lit up with a name that made his stomach twist. Lydia. He froze. His thumb hovered above the glass. It had to be a mistake. Then the message appeared. I miss you. I'm home. For a full 10 seconds, Daniel couldn't breathe. The air seemed to leave the room. His first thought was that someone had stolen her phone. Maybe one of the people at the funeral? But that made no sense. He had watched them lower her coffin. And he remembered distinctly. Lydia's phone had been placed in her hands before the lid closed. He whispered to the empty room, "This isn't real." He called the number. His heart pounded as the line clicked. 1 ring, 2. Then a familiar voice, her voice, answered, calm and mechanical. "Hi, it's Lydia. Leave a message." Daniel's chest tightened. He hung up, hands trembling, staring at his reflection in the dark TV screen. The rational part of his mind began grasping for answers. Maybe the number was recycled. Maybe the signal glitched. Maybe he typed her name into his contacts wrong. But no. The photo next to the name was Lydia's, smiling in that yellow sundress she loved. He read the message again. I miss you. I'm home. He whispered the words out loud, as if saying them would make them less impossible. Something inside him shifted. A pull. Quiet, but insistent, leading him toward the hallway. The air grew colder as he walked. When he reached the bedroom door, it creaked open slightly, though he was sure he'd closed it earlier. He stepped in. The scent hit him instantly. Her perfume. Not faint this time. Fresh. On the nightstand, his phone buzzed again. Another message. Why are you crying? He dropped the phone. His breath came in uneven gasps. Slowly he backed toward the door, but his heel caught on something soft. Her slippers. They hadn't been there earlier. Daniel stumbled out of the room and leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself. The house seemed to hum, faint electricity under the silence. He wanted to believe this was grief, that his mind was breaking under the weight of loss. But the messages, the timing, the smell. He picked up the phone again. The messages were still there, real, solid. Outside, thunder rolled over the town, a deep sound that made the window panes tremble. Daniel sank to the floor, clutching the phone, whispering her name like a prayer. Then, as lightning flashed across the room, the phone lit up once more. You said you'd never leave me. Daniel's hands went cold. The message had a location tag, his home address. He turned slowly toward the dark hallway where the faint sound of a floorboard creaked. And for the first time since Lydia's death, Daniel realized he might not be as alone as he thought. The night after the message, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the couch until dawn, watching the shadows crawl across the walls. Every creak, Every distant sound made his heart jolt. The storm had passed, leaving the world damp and eerily quiet. When the first gray light seeped through the windows, he finally forced himself to move. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and lavender. That same perfume again, too vivid to be memory. He walked down the hallway, phone in hand, staring at Lydia's last text. "You said you'd never leave me." He checked the timestamp again. 3:04 a.m. He hadn't heard a thing when it arrived. The house, built decades ago, had always been full of soft noises, the groan of old pipes, the hum of the refrigerator. But now, every sound felt intentional, as if the house itself were breathing with him. He stepped into their bedroom. Lydia's slippers were still by the door where he'd left them last night. On her dresser, her jewelry box was open. He didn't remember opening it. Inside, the silver locket he'd given her on their 5th anniversary was missing. He swallowed hard. "Lydia?" His voice cracked in the quiet. "If this is you." Silence. Then the phone buzzed. Another message. "Check the attic." Daniel froze. The attic. He hadn't been up there in years. Lydia used to store boxes of old letters, photo albums, and a chest she never let him touch. She'd called it her safe space. He hesitated, thumb shaking above the screen. "Who are you?" he whispered. The reply came almost instantly. "You promised to keep me safe." His throat went dry. He climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, each step groaning beneath his weight. When he pulled the string to turn on the light, a single dim bulb flickered to life. Dust hung in the air like faint smoke. Boxes lined the walls, some labeled in Lydia's neat handwriting. Wedding, old letters, college. But on, he sat alone near the back, unlabeled, its lid slightly ajar. Daniel knelt and opened it. Inside were stacks of envelopes tied with red ribbon, hundreds of them. He picked one at random. It was addressed to Daniel Reed but had never been mailed. He unfolded it slowly. Lydia's handwriting curved across the page, delicate and precise. "I'm scared of what I've done. If anything happens, know that I tried to fix it." His hands trembled. What's she done? Fix what? He dug through the rest of the box. The letters spanned years. Hidden confessions, apologies, half-written messages about keeping things secret. And at the bottom, he found a photograph. Lydia standing in front of a small cabin in the woods, smiling nervously. The photo was dated 2 weeks before her death. The phone buzzed again. "You found it. Don't stop now." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He glanced around the attic. Empty, still, yet every instinct screamed that he was being watched. He backed toward the stairs, gripping the photo tightly. His mind raced through possibilities. Someone was playing a sick game, or worse, Lydia wasn't dead. The idea lodged in his chest like a splinter. Downstairs, the house felt colder than before. The curtains swayed though the windows were shut. On the kitchen counter, his phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a picture message. The same photo of Lydia by the cabin, but edited. A red circle now marked the woods behind her, with the words, "She's waiting for you." Daniel's breathing quickened. His rational mind battled with the impossible. He looked toward the back door where beyond the glass the trees whispered under the morning wind. He didn't know who was sending the messages, or if it was truly her. But something in those woods connected to Lydia's secret. And for the first time since her funeral, Daniel felt a flicker of purpose stronger than his fear. By the time the sun climbed high enough to burn away the fog, Daniel had made up his mind. He couldn't do this alone. Lydia's messages, the attic letters, the photo, they all pointed towards something real. And if anyone knew what Lydia had been hiding, it was her best friend, Clara Hayes. He hadn't spoken to Clara since the funeral. She'd cried harder than anyone else that day, clutching Lydia's photo as though her heart had been buried too. Now, as Daniel parked in front of her small white house on the edge of town, he felt the old discomfort of intruding on someone else's grief. He rang the bell once. No answer. Just when he turned to leave, the door creaked open. Clara stood there, pale, her hair tied back carelessly, her eyes red as if she hadn't slept. "Daniel," she said softly, "you look awful." "I need to talk," he replied, his voice rough. She hesitated before stepping aside. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of coffee and lilac. Family photos lined the hallway. Clara, Lydia, and Daniel, smiling in happier times. Seeing them now felt like knives pressing into his ribs. They sat at the kitchen table. Daniel placed his phone between them. "I've been getting messages," he began. "From Lydia." Clara blinked slowly, then forced a shaky laugh. "You're joking." "I wish I was." He showed her the texts. She stared, lips parting slightly as she scrolled through them. "I miss you. I'm home. You promised to keep me safe. Check the attic." Clara set the phone down with trembling hands. "This is sick," she whispered. "Someone's tormenting you." "She was buried with her phone," Daniel said, his tone sharper now. "You were there. You saw it." Clara looked away. "Yes, I placed it myself. Lydia wanted it that way. Said if something happened, she'd still have a way to reach you." Her voice broke on the last word. Daniel leaned forward. "Then tell me about the CN bin, the one in the picture." Her face drained of color. "Where did you see that?" "In the attic. Lydia's letters were hidden up there." For a long moment she said nothing. The only sound was the faint tick of the wall clock. Finally she whispered, "She made me promise never to mention that place." "Why, Clara?" Clara rubbed her temples, tears brimming in her eyes. "Because that's where she used to go when she needed to think. But lately, she wasn't alone there." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Who was she with?" "I don't know his name," Clara said. "She met him online, said he was helping her with something private. I thought it was harmless at first. Then she started talking about being watched. She said if anything happened, to keep quiet until she reached out." Daniel stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. "Reached out? She's dead, Clara." Clara's hands shook. "I know what it sounds like, but Lydia wasn't the same those last weeks. She was terrified of someone or something. She told me she had a plan, but she wouldn't say what. And then, the accident." Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "You think she could still be alive?" Clara's expression twisted between guilt and fear. "I don't know what to think anymore, but if she's contacting you, Daniel, maybe she needs help, or maybe someone's pretending to be her for a reason." Before he could reply, Daniel's phone buzzed again on the table. Both of them froze. A new message appeared, the text stark against the screen. "She shouldn't have told you." Clara's face went white. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They're listening." Daniel grabbed the phone, scanning for any clue, but the message had no sender ID, just Lydia's name. A chill moved through the room, heavy and suffocating. Daniel stood abruptly. "I need to know who's doing this. You said she met him online. Find anything about him. Please." Clara nodded weakly, her eyes glistening. "Be careful, Daniel. You're digging into something she wanted buried." He left the house without looking back. As he stepped into the fading afternoon light, his phone buzzed once more. "You're next." The message came with a location pin, the same cabin in the woods. The sun had long disappeared by the time Daniel reached home. The message from Lydia's number, "You're next," kept flashing in his mind like a siren he couldn't shut off. He'd driven around for hours, trying to convince himself it was some cruel prank, maybe a hacker or a stalker. But the location pin on his phone stayed fixed on the same spot, the woods behind his house. He parked in the driveway and sat motionless, the engine humming softly. The forest beyond the fence looked darker than usual, a dense silhouette under the thin crescent moon. Every instinct told him to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for daylight. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, pushed harder than fear. Inside, the house greeted him with stillness. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hands trembled so violently the glass slipped, shattering across the floor. The noise seemed too loud, too sudden. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once, then went silent. Daniel picked up his phone again. The message stared back at him. "You're next." Beneath it, the map pin blinked faintly. He zoomed in and saw the exact coordinates, barely a quarter-mile from where he sat. The same patch of trees Lydia used to walk through when she needed space to think. He muttered under his breath, "If this is you, Lydia, I'm coming." Grabbing a flashlight from the drawer, he stepped out into the night. The air was cold enough to sting his skin. The beam from the flashlight sliced through the darkness, catching bits of fog that clung low to the ground. Branches whispered as the wind pushed through them. The deeper he went, the quieter it became, until even the sound of his own footsteps felt intrusive. Then his phone buzzed again in his pocket. The vibration startled him so sharply he nearly dropped it. "Turn around." Daniel froze. His breath clouded in front of him. He turned slowly, sweeping the flashlight across the trees. Nothing, just leaves shifting in the wind. He forced a shaky laugh. "You're losing it," he whispered to himself. "You're—" A crack echoed behind him. He spun the light back, heart pounding. In the distance, a faint shape darted between two trees, small, fast, human. "Lydia?" he called. His voice sounded foreign in the open dark. No answer. But a second later, another sound, the ding of a message. He raised the phone. A new photo had arrived. His blood ran cold. It was a live image, taken seconds ago, from behind him. In the photo, he stood frozen in the woods, flashlight in hand. The realization hit him like ice. Someone was out there, close enough to photograph him. Panic took over. He began backing toward the house, eyes darting through the shadows. Every crunch of leaves felt like a footstep behind him. When he finally broke through the tree line, he didn't stop running until he slammed the back door shut and locked it. Inside, he leaned against the door, gasping for air. His phone vibrated once more. "Don't go outside again." Daniel dropped to the floor, his pulse roaring in his ears. He wanted to call the police, but what would he say? That his dead wife's number had lured him into the woods? That someone, or something, had been watching him there? He pressed his forehead against the cold tile. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe he was losing his mind. Just as he began to calm his breathing, another sound cut through the silence. A faint tapping, soft but rhythmic. He lifted his head, listening. The sound came from the front porch. He rose slowly, moving toward the window. Through the sheer curtain he saw movement, a figure standing just beyond the porch light, too still to be human. The phone buzzed again. "Let me in." Daniel's hands went numb. The figure took one step forward, the motion sending a shadow crawling across the living room wall. And then, silence. By morning, Daniel looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt clung to him with cold sweat, and the house was littered with half-drunk coffee cups. The tapping on the porch had gone on until nearly 4 a.m. Slow, deliberate, and human. When he finally gathered the courage to look again, the figure was gone, leaving only wet footprints across the wooden boards. He'd taken photos of them before they faded, his hands trembling so violently that half the images came out blurred. Now, sitting at the police station, those photos lay on the desk between him and Detective Marcus Hale. Hale was a tall, broad man in his 40s, the kind whose patience had been worn thin by too many late-night cases and not enough truth. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying Daniel carefully. "So," Hale began, his tone measured. "You're saying your wife texted you, after her funeral?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. From her phone. I have the messages, the photos, the footprints outside. Someone was there last night." The detective's expression didn't change. He reached for Daniel's phone, scrolling through the messages. These could have come from anywhere. Spoofed numbers, cloned SIMs. Grief makes people vulnerable, Mr. Reed. Daniel clenched his jaw. "I'm not imagining this. The messages mention things only Lydia could know. The attic, the box, the cabin." Hale paused at that. "Cabin?" Daniel leaned forward. "A cabin in the woods. I found a photo of Lydia there, dated 2 weeks before she died. Her best friend, Clara, said Lydia went there with someone she met online." Hale frowned. Was this man ever identified? No, Clara didn't know his name, but Lydia was scared, Detective. I think he's the one texting me. For a moment, Hale studied him in silence. Then he sighed and leaned forward. "Look, Daniel, I get it. Losing someone can twit. Just how you see things. But let's be practical. You buried your wife, right? You saw the casket go into the ground?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Yes." "Then she's not walking around texting you. Someone is using her phone." "Her phone was buried with her!" Daniel snapped, his voice echoing too loudly in the sterile room. Heads turned. Hale held up a hand. "All right," the detective said calmly. "Let's start there. If what you're saying is true, her SIM card should be inactive. But if it's still sending messages, that's a traceable signal." Daniel's breath hitched. "You can trace it?" "I can try," Hale said. "But if we find out it's coming from her grave, I want you to promise me something. You'll consider getting help. Grief counseling. This kind of trauma can make your mind—" Daniel slammed his palms on the desk. "I don't need a therapist. I need someone to believe me." The outburst hung in the air. Hale studied him a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Fine. I'll open a case file. We'll run a trace on the number. But until then, stay home. Don't go chasing ghosts in the woods again." Daniel's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "You don't think I'm crazy?" "I think," Hale said, standing, "that something strange is happening. And strange doesn't always mean supernatural." A few hours later, Daniel sat in his car outside the station, gripping the steering wheel. He wanted to feel relief, but instead there was only dread. Somewhere inside him, he feared the detective would uncover something he wasn't ready to face. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, his phone buzzed. It was a message, not from Lydia this time, but from Detective Hale. "Call me as soon as you can. We found something." Daniel's fingers shook as he dialed. Hale's voice was low, urgent. "We traced the signal. The texts are coming from your wife's SIM card, yes. But you're not going to believe here it's pinging from." A pause. Daniel's heart pounded. "Where?" "The cemetery," Hale said, "from inside her grave." For a long moment Daniel couldn't speak. His world seemed to tilt sideways. "That's impossible." "I'm having a team verify it in the morning," Hale said. "Don't go there alone, Daniel. Promise me." Daniel barely slept that night. The detective's words kept replaying in his mind. The texts are coming from her grave. It didn't make sense. Nothing did anymore. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling until dawn bled through the curtains, his phone clutched tightly in one hand, half expecting another message. None came. Just silence, and the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. By mid-morning, his exhaustion had shifted into a desperate kind of focus. If Lydia's phone really was sending messages from the cemetery, there had to be a reason. Something or someone controlling it. And if she'd been hiding something before she died, the truth had to be buried somewhere else too. He went to her office, a small room she'd claimed as her writing space. Dust motes drifted lazily in the sunlight. Lydia's laptop still sat on the desk, screen dark, covered in a thin film of dust. Daniel hesitated. He'd avoided this room since her death. It felt invasive, like stepping into a memory he didn't deserve to touch. Finally, he opened the laptop. The login screen blinked to life. Password required. He tried the usual. Birthdays, their wedding date, her mother's name. Nothing worked. He sat back, rubbing his temples, when a faint sound came from the hallway. A notification ping. His phone lit up. A message. You already know the password. Daniel's breath caught. He turned back to the screen. For a long moment he stared, then slowly typed his own name. Daniel. The computer unlocked. The desktop was neatly arranged, typical Lydia, but one folder in the corner stood out, labeled Finances 2024. He opened it, expecting tax forms or receipts. Instead, he found a single encrypted file titled Horizon. A password prompt appeared again. He hesitated, then typed Lydia's old favorite phrase, lavender sky. The file opened. Inside was a series of transactions. Large sums of money moved from their joint account into another one under a different name, E. Cross. Over $70,000 gone in small increments over 6 months. Daniel scrolled faster, his heart pounding. The last transaction was dated 3 days before the accident. He whispered to himself, "Who the hell is E. Cross?" The answer came almost instantly. His phone buzzed. You found him. Daniel jumped, nearly dropping the phone. He typed a reply for the first time since it all began. Who are you? What do you want? The dots appeared, paused, disappeared. Then a single response came through. The truth. The laptop dinged again. A new email appeared in Lydia's inbox, time-stamped for that exact minute. Subject line. You said you'd keep it secret. Hands trembling, he opened it. Attached was a photo. Lydia and a man standing close together, smiling. He recognized the background immediately. The same cabin from the photo in the attic. The same woods behind his house. The email address was untraceable, just a string of random letters. But the signature line chilled him. E. Cross. Daniel pushed the chair back, pacing the room. Lydia hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been hiding something deeper, something dangerous. He scrolled through the rest of the emails. Their tone shifted from affectionate to fearful. Lydia had written things like, "He's watching us," and "If this goes wrong, I'll disappear first." Disappear. He whispered, "She planned it." His phone buzzed again. Another message from Lydia's number. He took everything. Don't trust anyone. Daniel stared at the words, the realization dawning like slow poison. Lydia hadn't been running from him. She'd been running from someone else. Someone still out there. He grabbed his keys and rushed out of the room, heart racing. If the money transfers were real, the bank would have records. Maybe even a name, an address, something tangible. He didn't notice the movement outside the window, the faint shadow shifting among the trees. At the front door, his phone vibrated once more. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call. The screen read, Detective Hale. Daniel answered breathlessly. Detective? Hale's voice was low, tense. "We need to talk, Daniel. The exhumation's been approved. We're digging up Lydia's grave tomorrow morning." Daniel froze, staring out the window toward the cemetery hill. "And if she's not there?" Hale hesitated. "Then we've got a bigger problem than I thought." The line went dead. Daniel lowered the phone, his reflection faint in the glass. The woods outside seemed darker than before. The morning sky hung low and gray, thick with the smell of rain and turned earth. Daniel stood by the cemetery gate, his coat collar pulled up, hands buried in his pockets. The graveyard was quiet except for the metallic rumble of shovels and the murmured voices of men who didn't want to be there. Detective Hale approached from behind, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You don't have to be here for this," he said softly. Daniel's voice was flat. "I buried my wife once, Detective. I'll be here if she's gone." Hale studied him for a long moment before nodding. He motioned to the forensics team. The tarp covering Lydia's grave was pulled aside. Cold air rushed up as the first shovel broke the soil. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. Every strike of metal against dirt felt like a heartbeat. He thought of the last message. He took everything. Don't trust anyone. The words burned in his mind. Minutes stretched like hours. Mud-streaked men worked methodically, layer after layer, until one of them stopped. "We've hit it," someone said. A dull thud, then another. The coffin lid. The air seemed to thicken as they cleared away the rest of the soil. The lead investigator knelt, brushing away final traces of dirt before signaling to the team. The lid was lifted. Slow, careful, reverent. Daniel held his breath. The inside was empty. Not empty in the sense of void, but wrong. The coffin was half collapsed, the interior lined with claw-like scratches along the wood. And where Lydia's body should have been, there was only a torn section of burial fabric, stained dark at the edges like something, or someone, had tried to crawl out. Daniel staggered back, bile rising in his throat. "No, no, that's not possible." Hale's face went pale. "Everyone step back. Nobody touches anything." The team froze, cameras flashing in the heavy silence. The smell of rot hung in the air, faint but undeniable. Daniel whispered, "You said the texts came from the grave." Hale nodded slowly, eyes locked on the coffin. "They did. But if she's not here, then who's sending them?" Daniel finished, his voice breaking. Before Hale could answer, one of the officers called out, "Detective! Over here!" A few feet away, the soft earth near the grave's edge had caved slightly. Something glimmered beneath the mud. A small, cracked phone. Hale crouched down, pulled on gloves, and carefully lifted it. The screen flickered, then died. He turned it over. Lydia's initials were engraved on the back. Daniel's knees went weak. "That's her phone." "Bag it," Hale ordered quickly. "We'll run a full forensic check." As the team packed up the coffin site, Hale looked toward Daniel, his expression unreadable. If someone dug her up, they knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel shook his head. "No. Look at those scratches. She didn't get out. She tried to." The words hung between them, cold and impossible. Thunder rolled in the distance. The first drops of rain began to fall, darkening the soil. Hale placed a firm hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Go home. Let us handle this from here." But Daniel didn't move. His gaze was locked on the open grave, the hollow space where his wife should have been. Something inside him whispered that this wasn't over. As Hale turned away, his radio crackled faintly. Static hissed, then a voice broke through. "Unit 7, we've got movement registered at the victim's property. Basement motion sensor active." Hale's head snapped toward Daniel. The two men locked eyes. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "That's my house." The rain began to pour, washing the dirt from the edges of the grave as the team scrambled. Hale grabbed his coat. "We're going. Now!" Daniel looked one last time into the coffin, at the torn fabric and the scratches gouged deep into the wood. His stomach churned with dread. If Lydia hadn't escaped the grave, then someone, or something, wanted him to believe she had. The headlights cut through the trees like pale knives. Rain still clung to the branches, dripping steadily as Daniel and Detective Hale made their way down the narrow road leading to the edge of the forest behind Daniel's property. The police cars followed in silence, their lights dimmed, casting a red-blue pulse through the mist. "Motion sensor went off twice," Hale said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "First at the basement door, then the back gate. Whoever it is, they're still nearby." Daniel stared out the window, eyes wide and sleepless. The events at the cemetery looped in his head like a fever dream. The empty coffin, the scratches, Lydia's phone in the dirt. "If she's out here," he whispered. "If she's really out here." "She's not," Hale interrupted. "But someone wants you to believe she is." They parked near the tree line. The forest stretched before them, dark and glistening. A single flashlight beam sliced through the fog as they stepped out, boots sinking into wet soil. The air smelled of pine and decay. Crickets had gone silent. It was too quiet, the kind of silence that feels like someone's listening. Hale motioned for the officers to spread out. "Stay within range. If you see movement, call it in." Daniel followed closely, the beam of his flashlight trembling. Every branch seemed to move, every rustle a whisper. He couldn't shake the thought that Lydia had once loved walking here, back when they'd still believed in forever. Then he saw it. A faint shape ahead between the trees. A figure, standing still. "Detective," Daniel breathed. Hale raised his light. The figure didn't move. It was a woman, barefoot, wearing something pale and torn. Her head was bowed, hair hanging wet and tangled over her face. Daniel froze, his chest tightening. "Lydia?" Hale drew his gun. "Don't move!" The woman didn't respond. The flashlight beam wavered over her, revealing streaks of mud down her arms, her skin pale as candle wax. "Stay back," Hale warned, stepping forward cautiously. "Identify yourself." The woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes caught the light, hollow, glassy, unblinking. Daniel stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No! That can't be her!" But it was her face. The same lips, the same scar by her left eyebrow, the same sorrow in her expression. "Lydia," Daniel whispered again, taking a step closer despite Hale's hand gripping his arm. "It's me, Daniel." Her mouth trembled. Then, in a voice that sounded almost too faint to be real, she said, "You weren't supposed to find me." Hale's gun wavered. "What the hell?" The flashlight flickered. When it steadied again, the woman was gone. "Where did she go?" Hale barked, sweeping his light across the trees. Daniel turned in circles, heart hammering, searching for her shape among the fog. "She was right there. You saw her." They ran forward, their boots slapping through mud. Branches snapped around them. A flash of white fabric darted between trees ahead. Too fast, too smooth. They followed, breath ragged, until the forest opened into a small clearing. A single cabin stood there. The SA, me one from the photo, the same one from Lydia's emails. Its windows were dark, door slightly ajar. Hale raised a hand to signal the others to stop. "We found something," he whispered into his radio. Then to Daniel, "Stay behind me." They crept up the porch steps. The floorboards creaked underfoot. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. Hale pushed the door open. The beam of his flashlight swept across the room. Dust, overturned furniture, a faint buzzing from a cracked phone charging in the corner. Daniel's breath caught. "That's her phone." The screen flickered to life. A new message appeared. "Don't let him find me." Before Hale could move, the back door slammed shut. The cabin plunged into darkness. "Detective!" Daniel shouted. There was a sound. Footsteps, fast and light, moving outside the cabin toward the woods again. Hale lunged for the door, but by the time he opened it, the rain had swallowed everything. The woman was gone. They stood in the doorway, breathing hard, the storm around them rising. Hale turned to Daniel. "She's alive, and she's running from someone." Daniel's voice shook. "Or something." Behind them, the phone buzzed once more. Hale picked it up and read the screen aloud. "You shouldn't have come here." The flashlight flickered again, and for a split second, Hale thought he saw a face in the window. Pale, watching, motionless. The cabin felt colder in daylight. Rain had stopped, leaving behind a dull mist that clung to the glass and warped the outlines of trees outside. Daniel sat at the wooden table, staring at the cracked phone that had kept buzzing through the night. Every few minutes, it lit up again. Same number, same words. "You shouldn't have come here." Detective Hale stood by the open door, talking quietly into his radio. "We're sealing off the perimeter. No one goes in or out until forensics is done. And get a digital unit. I want every file on that phone analyzed." He ended the call and looked at Daniel, who hadn't spoken for several minutes. "You should get some air." Daniel didn't respond. His eyes were locked on a small flash drive lying beside the phone. It had been found taped to the underside of the cabin's table. A desperate, hidden clue. Hale had recognized it instantly. "Same model Lydia used for work," he'd said. "Encrypted, though. Might take a while to open." Now, that while had passed. The laptop on the table chimed as the drive finally decrypted. A single folder appeared. The truth. Daniel swallowed hard. "Play it." Hale nodded, double-clicked. The first video file opened. Lydia appeared on screen, sitting in the same cabin, her face pale, her eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept in days. "If you're watching this," she said, voice trembling, "then he found me, or he's close." She looked straight into the camera, almost as if she could see Daniel through time. "I didn't die, not the way they think, and I couldn't tell you, because you wouldn't have believed me." Daniel's throat tightened. His hands shook on the table. Lydia continued, "The man you know as E. Cross, he's not who he said he was. He found me online months before the crash. At first I thought it was harmless. He said he worked in financial security, could help me move some of our money to keep it safe. But he wasn't protecting us. He was using me." Hale's jaw clenched. "She's describing a fraud network," he muttered. "Identity laundering, money siphoning, classic pattern." But Lydia's tone shifted, darker now. "When I tried to stop him, he threatened to expose me. Said he'd make it look like I stole everything. Then he showed up at the house one night. You weren't home, Daniel. He said if I didn't disappear, he'd come after you instead." Her voice cracked. "So I did what he wanted. I staged it. The car crash, the fire, the body they found. It wasn't mine." Daniel's breath left him in a single broken exhale. "She faked it," he whispered. "He really faked her death." Hale nodded grimly. "And whoever E. Cross is, he's still controlling her, maybe even using her to get to you." The second video began automatically. Lydia looked worse, eyes red, breathing fast. "He's watching me all the time now. He says there's nowhere I can go. If I disappear again, he'll find you first. Please, Daniel. Don't try to find me." The screen glitched. For a moment, another face appeared behind her. Blurred, tall, wearing a hood. Then the feed cut to black. The room went silent. Hale leaned back, exhaling slowly. We can trace that background. That figure, that's our guy. She wasn't hiding from death. She was hiding from him. Daniel shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. I should have known. She tried to tell me. All those strange looks, the phone calls she wouldn't answer. She was terrified. Hale's expression softened. Don't blame yourself. Whatever this cross was doing, it's bigger than her, bigger than you. He paused. We'll find him. Daniel turned toward the window. The fog outside had thickened again, curling between the trees. For the first time, he noticed something. Footprints leading from the back door into the woods, fresh ones. Hale, he said quietly. Someone's been here. The detective followed his gaze, then drew his gun. Stay inside. But Daniel didn't listen. He stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the mist. The prints led deeper, winding toward the slope that overlooked the lake. And at the very edge of the trees, half hidden by fog, stood a figure. Motionless, watching. Lydia? Daniel whispered. The figure didn't move. Then slowly it raised an arm, pointing not at him, but back toward the cabin. Hale's voice came from behind. Daniel, get down! A shot cracked through the air. The figure vanished into the fog. Birds scattered from the trees. Hale sprinted forward, scanning the woods, but found nothing except a trail of footprints disappearing toward the ridge. Daniel stood frozen, heart pounding, ears ringing. She was there, he said. I saw her. Hal, he holstered his gun, eyes hard. Whoever's playing this game knows we've seen the recordings. They're trying to keep you off balance. Daniel turned back toward the cabin, the laptop screen still glowing faintly inside. Lydia's frozen image stared out, pleading, broken. Then they succeeded, he whispered. Hale placed a hand on his shoulder. Not yet. But we're close. Whoever he is, he's about to make a mistake. As they started back toward the cabin, the phone on the table buzzed again. A new message appeared, one that made both men stop cold. You're running out of time. The cemetery looked different under the noon light, clearer, almost peaceful, as if pretending nothing had ever happened. Yet the ground still bore the marks from the night before. The turned soil, the plastic tarps, the faint outlines of where Lydia's coffin had been unearthed. Detective Hale stood beside Daniel near the reopened grave, both silent as the forensic team worked carefully below. The police had returned that morning after the latest message. You're running out of time. Something about it had rattled Hale more than he wanted to admit. He adjusted his jacket and looked at Daniel. I still think you shouldn't be here. Daniel's eyes were hollow. I was here when she was buried. I was here when she was gone. I'll stay until I know where she really is. Hale sighed, knowing there was no convincing him otherwise. The forensic lead, a tall woman named Carter, called out from the pit. Detective, you might want to see this. They both approached the edge. Inside the grave, the coffin lay open once again, but this time, something new glinted in the dirt beneath it. Carter carefully lifted the object with tweezers, a small silver locket caked with mud. Hale frowned. Was that there last night? Carter shook her head. No. Someone's been here since. Daniel's stomach dropped. What's inside? Carter opened it carefully. Inside, there were two tiny photographs, one of Lydia, the other of Daniel, but the glass over Lydia's face had been cracked deliberately, as if crushed under pressure. Daniel reached out instinctively, but Hale stopped him. Evidence first. Don't touch it. He turned to Carter. Get that processed immediately. And check for prints. I want to know who put it there. Carter nodded, moving away. Daniel stared down at the coffin, his voice barely audible. If she wasn't in there, where did she go? Hale hesitated. Maybe she never left. Daniel looked at him sharply. What are you saying? The detective crouched, examining the interior of the coffin. These scratches, they weren't all made from the inside. Some came from above, angled downward. Someone reopened this before we did. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. Then why put the locket back? Hale straightened, his expression dark. A message. Someone's letting us know they're still in control. Before either man could say more, one of the techs shouted from the van parked nearby. Detective, you need to see this, now! They rushed over. The tech pointed at a monitor showing live security footage from the night before. The grainy image displayed the cemetery hours after the police had left. At 2:13 a.m., a figure appeared on screen. Slender, wearing a long coat, moving toward Lydia's grave. The timestamp matched the estimated time the locket had been placed. Can you enhance that? Hale asked. The image zoomed in slightly. The face was still obscured by darkness, but the outline, the hair, the way the head tilted, made Daniel's breath catch. It's her, he whispered. It's Lydia. Hale frowned. We can't be sure yet. But Daniel wasn't listening. He stepped closer to the screen, his voice trembling. That's her posture, the way she walks. I'd know it anywhere. The footage continued. The figure knelt beside the open grave, placed something inside. The locket. Then turned to face the camera directly. For just a second, the light caught her face. Pale, wet, familiar. Lydia. Then the screen went black. Hale ran a hand over his face. This doesn't make sense. If she's alive, why would she come back here? Daniel's voice was distant. Maybe she wanted me to find her. He looked toward the line of trees beyond the cemetery. The forest loomed there, quiet and watchful, the same forest that hid the cabin. I need to go back, Daniel said suddenly. If she's hiding, she'll go there again. It's the only place that meant anything to her. Hale stepped in front of him. Daniel, wait. If she's involved in whatever Cross was doing, going there alone could get you killed. Daniel met his gaze, his tone firm. She's my wife. If she's alive, I have to know why she's doing this. For a long moment, Hale said nothing. Then finally, he nodded. Fine. But I'm coming with you. We do this my way. Careful and armed. Daniel exhaled shakily, glancing one last time at the empty coffin. She was here, he murmured, and she wanted us to know it. As they turned to leave, a gust of wind swept through the graveyard, scattering loose soil across the open pit. Daniel didn't notice the faint shape buried just beneath the dirt near the coffin, a set of footprints, smaller than his, leading away from the grave and into the woods. At that same moment, Hale's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowned, and froze. The message was from Lydia's number. You're digging too deep, Detective. He looked up sharply at Daniel, but the man was already walking toward the car, eyes fixed on the dark stretch of forest ahead. The road back to the woods felt endless, winding through fog that seemed to swallow the world whole. Detective Hale drove in silence, his fingers tapping restlessly on the steering wheel. Daniel sat beside him, staring out the window, his reflection pale and hollow in the glass. The phone in Hale's pocket hadn't buzzed again, but the message still echoed between them. You're digging too deep, Detective. She knows we're close, Hale said finally. Whoever's sending those messages, if it's her, if it's not, wants to keep us away from that cabin. Daniel turned toward him, eyes weary but resolute. Then that's exactly where we need to go. They reached the tree line just as daylight began to fade. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and pine. Hail killed the engine and both men stepped out, their boots sinking into the mud. The forest ahead was unnervingly still. "This is it," Hale murmured, drawing his flashlight. "Stay behind me. If she's here, we do this carefully." They moved through the woods, guided only by the faint beam of light cutting through the mist. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the sigh of wind through the branches, made Daniel's pulse quicken. The memory of Lydia's pale face from the footage haunted him. When they reached the clearing, the cabin stood exactly as before, dark, silent, and waiting. Hale motioned for Daniel to stay back as he approached the porch. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking with the wind. "Lydia?" he called out cautiously. "It's Detective Hale. We're not here to hurt you. We just need to talk." No response, only the soft dripping of water from the eaves. Hale pushed the door open and stepped inside. The flashlight swept across the walls, peeling paint, broken furniture, and a faint glint of metal near the table. Daniel followed slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. Then he saw it. On the table sat Lydia's cracked phone, glowing faintly. A new text appeared on the screen as they entered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Daniel's throat tightened. He stepped closer. "Lydia, if you're here, please just talk to me." Another message blinked into existence. "He's watching. Don't trust him." Hale frowned. "Don't trust who?" Before they could react, another sound came from behind the cabin, footsteps crunching on wet leaves. Hale motioned for Daniel to stay put and slipped out the back door, gun drawn. Daniel waited, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the phone. It buzzed again. "You shouldn't have brought him." His breath caught. He looked toward the open doorway. "Lydia?" From the shadows outside, a figure emerged, small, trembling, wrapped in a tattered coat. Her hair hung loose and wet against her face. For a moment, Daniel couldn't move. It was her. "Lydia," he whispered, stepping forward. She looked thinner, paler, her eyes hollow but unmistakably alive. "You shouldn't be here, Daniel," she said softly, her voice shaking. "He'll kill us both." "Who?" Daniel asked. "Who are you talking about?" Before she could answer, a gunshot split the air. Hale's voice shouted from outside, "Down!" Lydia flinched, grabbing Daniel's arm. "It's him! He found us!" Chaos erupted. Hale burst back through the door, firing toward the trees. "Move! Someone's out there!" The phone on the table vibrated again, its light flickering wildly. A final message appeared. "You can't save her twice." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at Lydia, who was shaking uncontrollably. "What does that mean?" Her lips parted, but before she could speak, a dark figure appeared at the window. A man in a hood, face obscured, aiming straight at Hale. Hale dove for cover as another bullet shattered the glass. Daniel pulled Lydia to the floor, shielding her with his body. The cabin filled with dust and splinters. When the gunfire stopped, there was silence again. Just the sound of Daniel's ragged breathing and Lydia's quiet sobs. Hale crawled to the window, scanning the woods, but the shooter was gone. "Are you hit?" he asked. Daniel shook his head, still clutching Lydia. "No, but she's burning up. She needs help." Hale holstered his weapon, eyes darting toward the phone still glowing on the table. Whoever that was, they knew he'd come. They're one step ahead. He picked up the phone, but the screen had gone dark, a faint crack spreading across the display. Then, with a soft chime, a new notification appeared. One final video file labeled Goodbye. Daniel's heart thudded. Play it. The video loaded slowly. Lydia appeared on screen again, same cabin, same expression of fear. "If you're watching this," she said, voice trembling, "then it's too late. He knows the truth now. He'll come for me first." She paused, eyes glistening. "I never stopped loving you, Daniel, but some graves shouldn't stay closed." The screen went black. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Hale turned to Daniel. "We need to move. Whoever she's running from isn't finished." Daniel nodded weakly, helping Lydia to her feet. She leaned against him, whispering, "I tried to keep you safe. I tried." Outside, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint echo of footsteps receding into the forest. And as they stepped into the night, Daniel's phone vibrated in his pocket. One last time. "See you soon."